Hey everybody, welcome to Jon D Podcast. I'm your host, Jon D Miller. Welcome to episode number 68, everybody. Number 68, numero 68 in the old Espanol language. That's right. 1,243, going on 1,244 days now as I begin to record this intro of No Booze. No booze, yeah, no booze. I say intro because once again, I have a fantastic guest for you today, this evening, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. How are yous? How are yous? How are y'alls? So I've known this gentleman for about 14 years, and I've been thinking about getting him on the show for a while. And one of the reasons why is because he has literally one of the coolest jobs you could probably ever hope for, at least as long as if you're into, things such as animation and the TV show Family Guy, because he is a storyboard artist on that show. I did. I hit him up. I said, hey, man, I've been thinking about having you on the show. He said, but in an open invitation. No rush, just whenever. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I'm recording a podcast with you. That's what I'm doing. And so that's what we did. We had a very cool conversation. It was a lot of fun. He's a really genuinely awesome and sincere person. But we talk about where he is today, how he got there, and some really awesome insights into not just animation, but the TV show Family Guy itself. And I really appreciate him being on the podcast. You're going to really like it. That being said, please follow me on social media. Jon D Comedy, Jon D Podcast on Twitter. That's right. Suck it, Elon. Jon D Podcast on Facebook. JonDpodcom on Instagram and Threads. You can write the show, JonDpodcom @gmail.com. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think that's everything. So this was awesome. I've been recorded this past Thursday. So it's been a few days since I've done this, and putting this all together it's been really cool. So hang out and enjoy my conversation with Mr. Patrick McCarthy. And here he is, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome to the podcast a longtime friend of mine, not one I've talked to in quite a while, but I'm so excited to have him here. I hit him up literally yesterday, and but I've known him for a long time, and I said, hey, dude, I've always wanted to have you on the podcast. Would you be interested? And he said, dude, let's do it tomorrow, which I take as I don't even know what to call it. Compliment. Please welcome to the podcast, everybody, Mr. Patrick McCarthy, who has one of the coolest jobs I've ever heard of in my entire life. He works on the award-winning and renowned. It has won awards. It should, in my opinion. Family Guy. Please welcome to the podcast, Patrick McCarthy. Patrick, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you.
Let's talk a bit about your back history. So what do you do right now? So we're going to start like the movie does, where it starts at the end and then it goes back and tells the story. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to start at the end.
You may ask, how did I get here?
Yeah, exactly. So what are you now? What do you do?
I am a storyboard artist at Family Guy.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times when I'm trying to explain it to people, it's kind of like being almost like an engineer or architect for the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're the first ones to kind of map it out. We're kind of determining where the camera's going to be, where the characters are, and what kind of main actions they're going to do. So it's like the kind of the first step between it just being words on a page to what it's actually going to look like.
Right.
Because then, after we map it all out, then it goes over to Korea and they animate everything over there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I knew there was some overseas going on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do that nowadays. They do it in podcasting, which, working in that, I know. I mean, I do my own, but they do send it overseas a lot. But yeah, that's what a storyboard artist does. You take the words, you make them into the pictures that we all get to see and enjoy, which of course on Family Guy would be Peter, Lois, Stewie, Brian, right? All them, Meg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool job. But you didn't always do that. So let's start off a little bit and let's go back a little bit now. Do you still do stand up at all?
No.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Huh? What made you decide to stop doing it?
Well, so you and I met between 2010 2011 because I moved
Was it
out
that
here.
late?
Well, because I was in school.
Oh, that's right.
I
You were. That's right. Okay, so you were at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I was,
Yeah, that's right.
and I studied creative writing there because I knew like freshman year of high school that I wanted to like move out to LA and do the whole Hollywood thing. But at the same time, I also loved stand up. I would like during the summers, I would watch like all the Comedy Central presents, the all the different little like stand up specials Comedy Central would have during the day. And
Right.
then when I turned 18, my senior year, I was like, okay, I'm going to the Funny Bone and I'm doing their competition.
Right.
And first time I did it, I won. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was cool, but it was just funny because I went back home, told my dad, I was like, Dad, I won first place at the Funny Bone, and he goes, I must not understand comedy anymore. I'm like, oh, thanks, Dad. It's
Oh
the
my God.
encouraging one.
You know what? I want to say that's awesome, but it's also so bad at the same time. But it's just it would be funny it'd be funny in a movie. Like
I can laugh at it now,
Yeah,
right?
sure, sure.
Yeah, but so I went to Virginia Tech to study creative writing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go out to California, but my dad was like, "Nah, you're staying in state. Like you're
You
going
were
to
a
do
little
your."
young for it at the time, right? 18, 19 when you were talking about doing it, right?
Yeah, well, I gotten into a film school out there, but my dad just again, but it's all good because went to Virginia Tech, had a good time there, and then when I graduated, I came home and was living with my dad again, and I was just like, I don't have camera equipment. I can't like record anything. I don't have enough funds to just go move out to LA. What can I do?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, I love stand up. Let me do that. So it was kind of just like a way to kind of get myself out there, express myself. But it was funny because I came out of the whole college mentality, which college is great, but it all the professors and everybody, they just kind of like, you're gonna do great. You're gonna change the world. And so you kind of come out like you're like, we're all gonna change the world, right, guys? And
Yeah.
and
That's
so
what they're
I
supposed to
I
do, right? I think that's what they do.
yeah,
They're like,
like I
you're gonna
had
change shit. That's what you paid us all this money to tell you.
yeah. So I came out with all this enthusiasm, which is definitely a good thing. But I also put my foot in my mouth a lot and just wasn't thinking I wasn't doing a good job of thinking about uh where other people might be at or what their experience is up to that point, like
Hmm.
it's kind of like when Justin Bieber came out with his documentary. It's like never stop believing or whatever. I'm like, dude, when did you have a chance to give up? You like
Right.
made it when you were 12, right?
Right. Good point. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was like, I'm like, we're all gonna do it, we're all gonna make it, we're all gonna succeed. And it's like, yeah, easy for you to say, bro, you just got out of school.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
So
he was just on the scene and it seemed like he already, like the
yeah.
struggle.
So I did stand up for about a year in Richmond, and yeah, we got to meet up a few times. It was cool because with you, like we didn't see each other too often, but I got to know some of the other comedians and they would speak highly of you. They're like, "Oh man, you should see when he performs." I'm like, "Okay, where is he? When am I going to see him?"
I didn't know those people said nice things about me. And it was funny. The other night I went to that open mic and somebody called me an OG.
Nice.
Like, you're an OG. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just an old guy. Maybe that's just all it is. Yeah. So 2012, I started seeing like, hey, I'm out here. I'm not dead or anything like that. I'm doing all right. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's cool. Good for him. Because one of the things that I never like, I've known comics, I've known other people, not just comics, but other people who have left their comfy town or whatever, not visited, but literally moved to another city that is a whole nother place, New York or LA. I used to want to go to LA. Used to want to work in animation, but I was more of a voice guy and then do stand up. But I always respect the people who did it, who went out there and chased their dreams. I mean, was anything else before you left Richmond? You were like, hey, Did you go out there with the intent of doing stand up?
It was my excuse to move out to LA. Like
Okay.
I was like, okay, and it was kind of my my building leaping off point. So
Right.
it's like because LA is huge.
Oh,
It's got
absolutely.
millions of people. It's almost like its own little country just because every section has its own name and it's
Mm-hmm.
its own like little municipality or whatnot. But yeah, I got out here to LA and thanks to stand up, I was able to like, okay, let me go to the Hollywood Improv, let me go to the Comedy Store, let me try to get up there, like and meeting people and kind of getting to know some people and just having that, but that at the same time, I would once I kind of got my feet planted, because actually the first few months I was in my car. I didn't have a
Yeah.
place to stay.
Yeah, so this is where I kind of wanted to touch on this because you were in the car. What was that like? So you get there. Did you not have a place to stay and you lost it? Like, what was the
It was
kind of what happened there?
it was kind of partially my own fault that it was like I was planning on moving out to LA, and as I was looking things up, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to understand until I actually get there. So instead of trying to like lock in a place or lock in a job and these are good, stable things to do, I was just like, it's going to take me forever if I try to line all this stuff up. So let me just go.
Mm.
And so I just went and yeah, like I found a gym. I joined a gym. It was like a 24-hour fitness, so I could go sleep in the parking lot, but I would go
Oh,
in at night, shower, brush my teeth, go sleep in the car, and in the morning go work out, go shower, and then go on about my day. I was using stand up to like, I was traveling all these different places around the city, kind of learning the different areas. Go, okay, this area is not so nice. Okay, this area is pretty safe. And so then from there, I finally got a job. And then once I got a job,
what
I
was
got
that
a
first job?
place. Uh, was really just weeks apart. I the first job I really had, I kept the entire time. I was a valet. I was a valet parking cars for
Nice,
7 years.
nice.
Yeah.
I think I remember hearing you talk about this at some point. I don't know where. Maybe it was Facebook or maybe some. I don't know. It was something I might have heard. But what was that like? What was being a valet like? I got to hear some of this for a second at least.
Well, I mean, that job specifically was very unique. So it's essentially it was valet work, but it was at a high-rise condominium where a lot of rich people lived.
Okay.
So instead of it being like a hotel where people come in and out, it was a home. It
Oh,
was
okay. So you had
where
like
all
regulars.
these
You had
people.
like people you knew. You had like
Yeah,
okay.
and so instead of kind of putting on that hotel concierge type of song and dance, it was more so trying to build connections and being like, oh, Mr. So and so, how are you doing today? Oh, did that work out for you? Like, just make small talk with them, make them feel comfortable in their home. And it also helped me in some ways because, like, for example, one resident that lived there was a writer,
Mm.
and he'd written on Simpsons, he'd written on Malcolm in the Middle, Frasier, and so I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to be a writer," and I entered like the Warner Brothers Writers Program. I was like, "Can you read my script and give me notes?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And he read a Family Guy spec script that I
Cool.
wrote, and his compliment was, "It reads like a script." And I was like, "All right, I'll take it." That's
Yeah. I mean, you're in
compliment.
the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And but it was also enough for him to trust me with things. So he invited me into like he had his own show. So he invited me into the writer's room. So I got to kind of observe how that
Can you say
went.
what show that was?
Yeah, it was a show called Wendell and Vinny.
Huh.
It was on Nick at Night back in 2012 time. And it was great. It was a great show, but it was like Nick at Night,
Yeah.
like kind of a confusing demographic. It's like who is that for necessarily? And he was incredibly nice, but the reason I kind of prefaced that the job was weird was because the it also had very unique management. And so a lot of the employees there would get away with anything. So we're parking, $500,000 cars. We're parking Lamborghinis, Ferraris and stuff. And these guys would scratch them
Wow.
or just not show up to work or even one time uh, our boss, it was like a Christmas party or something. It's like one of our employees had just gotten a divorce after just getting married over a weekend in
Oh, snap.
Vegas, right?
Nice.
One
Yeah.
of those. But the boss kind of made a joke about it. And then he went down into the garage and peed all over the windshield of our boss's car.
Really?
And we're just like, this dude, you're gonna get fired. But right before right before the boss called for his car the next day, we took like a
Took a hose and
what is
rinsed
it, like
him.
a pressure
Oh, really?
washer, wash it off real quick. But I mean, that okay, that was just one of and that guy didn't get fired or anything. Like anybody who left that job just
They
left.
just left on their own
Nobody ever
volition. Then
got
yeah,
fired.
they were getting kicked off of it.
Yeah, no matter what crazy things
Well, you're
happen.
parking Lamborghini, so you can drive stick, right? So that you could do.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people can't drive
But
stick anymore. That's a
that was one of my silly little stand-up bits that I had for a while where I was like, oh, my car has a great security system that keeps anybody from stealing it. It's called a manual transmission.
yeah.
And it's so good even I can't take it sometimes.
So that's an interesting job. So you were a valet at an apartment complex. So you had the regular people, which is kind of a different thing because I know in LA, I visited a few times out there, and I know that any place you go, a lot of times it's any place you go to someplace on Sunset, you go to a bar, you go to a club, it's valet, valet. And one of the biggest things about those is I always thought was funny was, I'm like, where are you parking these things? Because it didn't seem like there was any place around for them to put these cars, but
Mhm.
they would just take your car and then they come back. I always had rentals when I was there, so I wasn't that worried about it. But if I actually owned a Lamborghini or one of those type things, I'm sure I would have been more worried about it.
Yeah,
So you get on that
no,
show. So you're a
absolutely.
valet, and then but you get in with the writer. You're working on the show at Nick at Night, and then how did that kind of progress from there?
So it was literally observation. Like I was in no way affiliated with the show. But it was great just exposure, kind of just understanding. I feel like that was one of the first early lessons that I learned out here is just you sounds silly, but it's like you don't know until you know.
Sure,
You like you don't know what your goal or dream is until you come out here and see the other people doing
right.
it. And you're like, oh, that's what they're doing. That's how they're doing it. Okay, where do I start now that I know that? Right. And so even with that, there is kind of like to be like a writer on a television show, there is like a trajectory, right? You can be a PA and then be a writer's assistant, or you could do these programs and then hopefully, uh, you know, eventually become a staff writer. But that kind like the PA and writer's assistant stuff is kind of like a luxury. Like you had to be able to not receive income and keep yourself afloat. So those weren't really available to me at that point, right? It's kind of like a college kids thing.
Right. Well, you weren't homeless
So
for that long, were you? I mean, it was
I, I moved out here. It was the
right.
end of July, and so it was like August, September, and
Huh.
October. So that August and September, I was in my car, and then somebody I went to high school with was also out here, and then I crashed on his
Okay,
couch.
gotcha.
But I was one of like six in a
Ooh,
two-bedroom apartment. And but then by that November, I got a job, got a
cool.
place. And so then finally was no longer in my car and yeah, was parking cars for the next 7 years after that.
Doing other things, yeah.
But so that's what I was to say about stand up is so once I kind of got my feet planted and I was like trying to write like because I was learning from him or whatnot like I was also doing stand up but it'd be like an hour to get to any open mic and you had to get there an hour early if you wanted to sign up and then you have to wait about an hour into the show before you get up for a 3 to 5 minute set and then another hour to get home and I'm like man I could spend that 4 hours writing something
Right.
creating something so it just didn't make sense when I was finding that LA had everything available to you. Like anything you want to do, you could do. But in terms of like if you want to be a stand-up, there's plenty of different things, but that wasn't my only goal. That was just like a fun excuse to get out here.
I wanted to go out there and do stand up, but I don't. I mean, I think I'd do okay as a stand-up. I think I can hold my own, definitely. But, you know, I was talking to my last episode, buddy of mine from Canada who's a comic named Daryl, and we were talking about how, like, you go to LA and New York and, you know, you think you're good, you think you have it, and then you go up and you watch somebody you've never heard of before just destroy for 20 minutes. And my experiences in places like New York and LA is that, you know, you're watching some of the all-stars from where they're from. You know, you're watching the best from Wisconsin or the best from, you know, some guy. I remember one time I was out in LA and there was some dude, I can't remember the dude's name. He was from Idaho, of all places. And he literally went in there and just killed it at some little spot I was at. But yeah, the animation thing was, I was going to do voices. It doesn't matter. But, you know, but you had other things.
It does matter. Everything we want in this world matters.
Well, I
right?
like the mentality you have, Patrick. That's fantastic. You always seemed very, very bright and positive when I knew you before. So, yeah, I mean,
nothing's changed.
Good. I'm glad LA, you know, because that's what they say. People go to LA and they get bitter and they get jaded, or they.
Well, I would say the culture shock for me in that regard is LA trained me that you have to be an asshole, right. But you can do with that what you want. Mm-hmm. So what I guess I mean by that is, like, people out here are going to force you to have to say something. You can't just be. And so it's like, okay, well, what kind of asshole am I going to be? So I just always try to make sure that if I'm being an asshole, it's because I know I'm in the right, right? Or, like, it's not just about me. Like, I'll yell, I'll do the whatever, as long as I know it doesn't just benefit me.
Yeah.
Right.
It's one thing to be an asshole. It's another thing to be like a self-centered asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're standing up for somebody else or for a group of people, or, you know, whatever it might be, or, you know, even yourself, but at the same time, it's got to be correct in what you're doing, right? Yeah, make sure you got the right.
And it's just LA is just so full of crazy people, crazy things, and it's just like, I feel like in Richmond, like, of course there's crazy people and crazy things, but it's like, I feel like when those situations pop up, you can kind of just, like, whisper and be like, "Wow, that guy's a little crazy. I'm just gonna go now." But it's like, out here, you get confronted with it so often that you're like, I'm gonna have to do something right now.
Not that never happened in New York, but
I spent a total of 1 week in New York back when I was in Virginia. I went up to New York to try stand up there, just to see what it was like. And so it's kind of got a good impression of what people were like out there in that short window. But I quickly noticed that the difference between LA and New York is that people in New York are like, "Hey, who the hell are you?" Right? They're like, "Who do you think you are?" But out here in LA, it's like, "Do you know who I am? Do you know how important I am?"
That is extremely well put. Dude, that is literally, you nailed it on the head. That is exactly, yeah.
It's like, yeah, New York people hate when you have an ego, and LA people are astonished when you don't recognize their ego.
God damn, that is perfect. Somebody write that down and share something. That's the quote. Do you know who I am?
Yeah. But overall, I still, like, I'm very happy having moved to LA as opposed to New York, because in terms of chasing the dream, you really, and you can make it either place, right? Whatever it is your goals are. But I found that over the last decade of being out here, is there's more to life than the pursuit. Right. There's more to life than trying to, quote unquote, make it. And so what's nice about LA is, since it is its own kind of mini country, anything you want to do, any interest you have, there's something out here for you. All right. So it's like, you know, me and my wife, we go hiking, we go play volleyball at the beach, we go salsa dancing. Like, all these things are easily found and accessible all in one city, right? And then you can go and be on TV. You know, like,
I know that when I visited, I was always like, I almost moved there. I really, like, I almost had it. And then, but, you know, I just never had the balls to do it, which is why I respect people who do, because it is a leap. and it is a thing. And I loved it out there, but I was always happy to come home. I always remember when I would be leaving on the plane and like they would take off from, the back wheels would come up. I'm like, all right, see you next time, LA. I'm going home, and I was always happy to have done that. But yeah, like I said, I mean, I always respect the people that made the jump and did it. So you get out there, you get on TV. I don't think I know what your on TV experience was. What was that? Can you?
Well, okay.
Or is it
So
something you don't want to
I
share?
personally, well, it's more so like there's the Hollywood dream and then there's the Hollywood reality, right? So when I first moved out here, I was trying to expose myself to anything. I'm doing stand up, but I was also trying to audition for things, right? Like you got to try to do the whole actor thing as well. And there was like this calling thing where they're like, come out and we'll pay you $50 if you just like ring a doorbell, say some cheesy line, and then some girls could be like, sorry, you can't get in. So it was essentially just to be B footage for a reality show,
Oh,
dating
okay.
show.
Okay.
Right. So it was called Excused, hosted by Eliza
Yeah.
Schlesinger.
Yeah.
And so I came out and I did the whole doorbell thing and they fed me some cheesy line. They're like,
Right.
just say this. I'm like, all right, cool. And then they're like, hey, do you want to be on the show? What? And they're like, yeah, you could like I had a girlfriend at the time, but they were like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you want like we'll pay you like $150 for a day's work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, I'm
Why not?
unemployed. Right. And then so I did it and it was three girls and three guys and no matter what, whether you win or lose, you're paid the
Right.
same. And they explained that to us on the day of. So it's like they're like, okay, if you're like the first guy eliminated, then you're leaving by lunchtime. But if you're the winner, you're going to be here probably like 10 o'clock midnight. And so all the guys were like, you be charming. No,
Yeah.
you be charming.
Nobody
Like
wanted to
nobody
work the
wanted to
whole day,
win.
especially if you're getting paid the same regardless. Like you don't want to have to go. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was luckily one of the first eliminated. I got out of there by lunchtime. And it was because when I auditioned, they brought me in and they wanted me to interview and talk about myself, but this was going to be chopped up
Right.
footage for the girls to review about whether or not they let me into the house. And it was just so funny because this woman, she's setting me up. This woman interviewing me, the way she's asking these questions, I'm just, how does this sound out of context?
Right.
Like you just chop this up. And so I felt like I did good the whole interview. I was like, all right, no, I've nailed it. There's nothing embarrassing they could pull on me. And then like at the end of the interview, she's like, okay, you don't have a home address listed. I was like, oh, well, technically I'm living in my car right now. She's like, ooh, talk about
Mm,
that. Aren't I trying to win a
yeah.
date? She's like, no, it'll be fine. Talk about that. So yeah, I like said something about living in my car. And then she fed me some corny line to say about it. All right. And then sure enough, fast forward like 3 months later, I'm no longer in my car, but now I'm on this dating show. And the guys are all waiting. They're like going to eliminate the first person. Please eliminate me. Patrick, I'm like, yes, we really like you, but dude, you live in your car. And I was like,
Yes.
yes,
Saving.
yes, I do.
It brought good something for once. It
Yeah.
brought.
But then it was just funny because I was on it for such a short time. But then I don't know, maybe after that aired a month or two later, I went to the Comedy Store to do a show, and because I was still doing
Right.
stand up at the time, and I'm meeting this guy, like just this random person. I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, Patrick. And he's like, oh, I know, yeah, excused.
Mm.
What?
You should have said, "You don't know who I am already? Don't you know who I am?" That's what you should have
Yeah,
said to the
no. But actually, it was funny because
guy.
there's a comedian, Odell Harrison from Georgia that I met up in Richmond one time. He was up there performing. But after I did the show, I got a voicemail from him. He was like, why the hell am I seeing you on this show talking about living in your car? I don't know, man.
I mean, you were just being
I didn't
honest, and
choose it.
it.
Yeah. I did it for
Yeah, I
$150.
mean
Come on.
that's
Who
LA
wouldn't?
for you. I mean, it's money. It's based on money. You want money, you want fame, and you had a guy at the store recognize you,
Yeah.
so that's pretty
But
cool.
other than that, No, I did like some crowd work on on a different show, and I mean the only time my name is in the credits now is on Family Guy.
Which, yeah,
Yeah.
which is awesome, by the way. So I want to hear about it. So we're gonna do more. So let's take a quick break, and then we're gonna hear more from Patrick McCarthy. We're gonna be talking about his work at the TV show Family Guy. More Jon D podcast right after this. When I quit booze for good, one thing I learned was to always keep your palate entertained. And one of my new favorite ways to make it happen is BlendJet 2. BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even an NA margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. Lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via USB-C. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. With over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, there's a BlendJet 2 to complement just about any style. What are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today. And be sure to use the promo code JonDpod12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of the BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use the code JonDpod12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever. BlendJet 2. And welcome back to part 2 of Jon D podcast with Patrick McCarthy. I'm so glad he's here. We learned in the first half of the episode, Patrick, the first part. I'm not sure it was going to be a half evenly, but the first part of the episode, we learned about you leaving Virginia, you get out to LA. We learned about some of your experiences out there and everything else. And then you are doing now, you get out there and you work on Family Guy. How did that start? When did it start? And I mean, of course, we could probably do a whole episode on it. Obviously, we're not going to. Because I wanted a little backstory. But how did it start? How'd you go into it? Because I know at one point you were doing Bantam Box, right? Which is
Bento Box, yes.
Bento Box. That's the one. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
And it progressed. So I'll let you tell the story. But
totally, yeah.
dude, I'm riveted. Like, go ahead.
Yeah. It was kind of it was partly a result of just like coming out here. You can't have a linear plan. You can't just say, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. You're like, all right, I'm going to do this, and one of five things might happen. And if number two or number three happens, then I'm going to create a new branch and figure that out. And so that that's kind of what happened is I was learning, teaching myself how to animate while trying to make my own content. And so I put out a bunch of cartoons and stuff, and they were all well received, but it was just a lot of people proclaim themselves a writer, whether they are, aren't, or good or not, it doesn't matter. But like in terms of animation, there's not many people that are saying, I'm an animator, I can animate well. So it's like I would put out this stuff, and they're like, yeah, the writing's good, but you animate? Can you animate this? So I would just get more and more attention from the fact that I was animating things.
Right.
And so I rolled with it, right?
Yeah.
And eventually I did what I called spec animations, where I was like, okay, I'm going to like showcase myself and my ability not only to write like a certain show, but to animate like the show. So I made like a South Park spec, I made a Family Guy spec, and those did really well. And then I did like a Game of Thrones prequel
Mm-hmm.
spec type of thing. But the Family Guy one, Stewie Potter, that hit the front page of Reddit. It got over like 1 million views when it did, and Family Guy saw it. So they saw it, and the producers reached out to me from the animation side. The animation producers reached out, and they were kind of like, "Hey, I can't say that we saw it, but we saw it, and it was really good."
Hmm.
And that was them being awesome because it's
Sure.
like, what if Family Guy comes out with an episode and it seems to have content from my video? They need to have plausible deniability or whatnot, but
Hmm.
they were awesome. they reached out to me, and when I met with them, they were like, "Do you want a job? Do you want to like work here?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but I I just figured my own way. I don't know how to do this in a professional setting."
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, okay.
You're not
You could
classically
probably."
trained, as they
Yeah, they
say.
were they
Yeah.
were like looking at my video and they're like, "Well, you do good at this or good at that. Like maybe you could try for one thing or another." But at the same time, I made friends with people there.
Right.
So like there was one person who was a storyboard artist there that me and him would grab lunch, and he was like, "Dude, you could be a storyboard artist." Sure, every animation I've made, I've had to storyboard for. I'm sure I could do that, but I don't know how. And he's like, "I'll show you." So he showed me their storyboards, and then like I started to learn more on my own, learn new software,
Right. Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
Storyboard Pro, which is kind of like the industry standard for storyboarding. And uh, then at Family Guy, they have a like there's the storyboard artist position, but then there's one below it called revisionist,
Right.
which is essentially the one that comes and cleans up all the stuff that the storyboard artists and the directors have slashed up. And so I applied for that. So I took the test for that, and Family Guy said, "Thank you, but no thank you."
Oh.
So they told me no, and it was cool. I kept working at things. I was still making my stuff. And then a year later, they're like, "Hey, we were reviewing your old test, your application. We want to bring you in for an interview." And so I was like, "Okay, cool. Like maybe now they're bringing me in." So I go in, I interview. It's like six or seven of them in the interview room with me, right? And then it
that's
went
a
well.
that's a pretty big panel to have to face.
Yeah, it was all the producers and all the supervising directors.
Wow.
So just for quick reference, it's like there's in the storyboarding department, it's like there's revisionist, board artist, assistant director, director, then supervising director.
Mm.
So all the supervising directors were in the room, and so were the producers. And just kind of got to know them all. It went well. And then afterwards, they were like, "Thank you, but no thank you."
Oh,
Let me know
dude,
again.
killing me over here.
But
Really?
then this other show called Hoops, which
Mhm.
was going to be a basketball show on Netflix over at Bento Box, some Family Guy people were jumping over to that. So
Oh,
like
okay.
one of the retakes directors there was going to be the supervising director for that show. And so my friend, he told me that he's like, "Hey, apply for that, because a new show, they don't command the same respect, right? Like people from Family Guy aren't going to necessarily jump ship from the most reliable show on earth
Exactly.
to the first season of something." So I applied to that, and the interview went really well. And, because I know a little something about basketball, despite the most storyboard artists aren't exactly the biggest sports fans.
Right, but you know the game, man. Right? You
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Shoot
Yeah.
some hoops every
Some
once in a while.
March Madness in my
Right.
blood. But so I got the job there, and that was huge. That was like,
I bet.
I still remember, like I got the email that I got the board artist position there while I was doing laundry at a laundromat. And I just like pumped because I was like, "Oh my God, I get to put in my 2 weeks notice at work."
The valet?
And at the valet, yeah, I
No
was
shit.
still parked cars up to that point.
That'd be
And
a moment. That's an LA moment right there, man. You had the LA
yeah,
moment. You're like, fuck, what am I doing with myself? What's good? Yes, right.
yeah,
Gotta got that.
go from having somebody put their dirty socks in my washer to all of a sudden, all right, I'm putting in my 2 weeks
I'm gonna
notice at
get my own
work.
washer. Damn it. I'm gonna get my
Yes.
own washer. Yeah.
So no, that was, and like I've had a couple of surreal moments just because even before, like with Stewie Potter, right?
Mhm.
That blew up on Reddit, and while it was blowing up, I
It's really
was
funny.
at work parking cars. So literally thousands of comments are pouring and being like, "Oh, this guy should be on Family Guy or whatnot." And meanwhile, they're like, "Patrick, go park that car." I'm like, "Okay, all right, I will." It's such a weird
that's when
dynamic.
that's when you say, "Do you know who I am? Do you know who I?" I have a
But
what is your your YouTube channel is
Patrick McCarthy animations.
Patrick McCarthy Animations. Two C's
Good.
in McCarthy.
Yes.
Yeah, Patrick McCarthy animations. Yeah,
I haven't posted anything in
on
literally years.
a while, but I go and look at it. I've looked at some of the stuff on there.
I
I was watching
actually
some
am
yesterday.
gonna
It's funny.
update things on there soon, just because I have been working on my own personal project. But anyway, uh, so Hoops hired me, and I put in I did my triumphant exit from the Carlisle. But then I learned that storyboard artists are constantly searching for work.
Mm,
You get staffed up on a show, you work on a few episodes of the season, and the season ends, and then you have to go find another show.
gotcha.
And now at a company like Bento Box, they can help you. You could be like, oh, well, we're also doing the Great North, or we're also doing Bosburg, or we're also doing this,
Right.
but nothing's guaranteed. They're not required to put you on another show. So I get on there, and then it's like, they're like, yeah, you're going to be on the show for 10 weeks. Oh, I might need to go back to parking cars.
Right. Well, how long were you on
So,
the other one for though? On Hoop. You were talking about Hoops. You were on 10 weeks. Or
mhm,
talking about
yeah.
okay for 10 weeks. Okay,
So I
gotcha.
get to
Okay.
Hoops, and they're like, yeah, you're on for 10 weeks. And so it's like, I was like,
Well, you said
oh,
people could leave with whatever and go back. So with the valet job, right? So
yeah,
you had that in the back
yeah.
pocket.
Yeah, but I kind of
Yeah.
I put in a whole 30-day notice. Like I was because they gave me 30 days notice. They're like, all right, you're gonna be on the show like in April. So I told my boss as soon as possible, and I was telling every resident there, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be leaving. Goodbye. It was
Mm,
nice knowing you.
yeah. I will not be back.
Yeah. But I mean, that's that kind of job, you don't burn bridges. You
Yeah.
don't burn bridges because it's a small world, right? But amongst the elite, it's an even smaller world.
I think that's why they call them the elite.
Yeah, totally. But
Right.
it's so these people, they may all be in this one central location, but as you're working your way up in the industry and dealing with people in higher levels of authority, there's going to be some overlap.
Right.
And there's going to be people that have connections to where I was parking cars. So I made sure to be as friendly as possible on my way out because I had no animosity. That place kept me afloat, kept my bills paid until I did get to that next step in my journey.
Right. I think everybody who goes to Hollywood and does something where they any whatever they a lot of people there's a lot that's the LA story. I mean, you get out there, you do a job that's not entertainment related, and so you move on from that. So you did it, man. You put in the work. This is why I
Yeah.
wanted to tell your story because you were out there. So you go Hoops with Bento Box, right? And then what's the progression on? So you're moving on from there.
So it got near end to my time there. Like I worked on a few episodes. They actually added a few weeks on to us because they were behind on schedule because they had an impossible schedule to start with. But it was cool. I was happy for the extra time, but then it became like, okay, what am I going to be doing next? But so then I email Family Guy, the producers over there. I'm like, hey, so I've been storyboarding. I've been over here at Bento storyboarding. Would love to come over to you guys if you have anything open. And they respond back. They go, yeah, sure, come on over. Like
Just
after
like that.
these two big no's and just years of knowing them and not, it's just like once you got that first gig, like
Yeah.
nobody wants to be the one that you learn your mistakes on.
Right. Right.
So after that, like once I got hoops and I emailed them, it was easy. I came on over, and so I started off as a revisionist on Family Guy, and that was August 2019. So April 2019, I was at hoops. August, I jump over to Family Guy, and then I've been there ever since. And it's been great because it, as I just said, like normally storyboard artists are jumping around from show to show to show, but then I got Family Guy, as I said, 2019, and then it's just kind of this forever show
Yeah,
that,
it's constant.
but then the pandemic hit.
Right.
The pandemic hit, and so it was good for animation because it was one of the few things that could be done during the
Hmm.
pandemic, but it was just I had all these ideas in my head. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll work at Family Guy for a year and then I'll try to get like a director position. Like, you don't move out here ambitious and then stop being ambitious, right? Like, it's
Sure.
like, all right, like, what are my next steps? But then the pandemic hits and I'm like, oh my God, thank God I have a job.
Yeah.
And I've been very loyal to Family Guy. And even through that time, just as I've been working on my own personal ambition and thinking about what's next, it's like it's always been, but never at the cost of Family Guy. Like I got to make sure I be a good employee, but because I was a good employee parking cars for 7 years, I could be a good employee to Family Guy while
Doing something
also
you love. Yeah.
keeping my dreams alive. But so that's the short of how I got into Family Guy. And what's nice about it is I feel like my animation journey has been completely opposite. Like a lot of people, they go and they learn traditional drawing and then like the 12 fundamentals of animation, and then they learn software and special effects and all that stuff. And I came in the opposite. I was like, okay, what's this software? What does this do? And learned
Right.
all this crazy stuff. And then I was like, oh, I need to learn how to draw.
Right.
And Family Guy is a bit old school in how they do things. Like Bento Box, like all the board artists are doing all kinds of crazy like animatic type of stuff, but Family Guy has its own department for it. So the directors and all they're very on top of what each panel looks like. How does each individual drawing look like? So it's been a good experience for me because you could watch Family Guy and think that the characters look very flat. And like,
Right.
oh, those are very 2D flat characters, but trust me, it could look a lot worse. It
Oh,
could look
sure.
much
Yeah.
worse. And so with the limited lines that you have for the characters, they teach us how to make sure that they keep that volume, that they're believable in their posing and acting. And so it's been a great experience. Like I think the most amazing thing for me at this point is to go from parking cars 8 hours a day to doing something 8 hours a day that makes me better at the things that I'm passionate about. Right. Like that's
Yeah.
what's amazing. It's like,
That's
okay,
really
like I
cool.
clock in, and by the time I clock out, even if I've done nothing for my own personal project, I've gotten better at what I do. So that's been the greatest part of it for me.
Also, one of the things with the animation, I'm a huge Looney Tunes type, fan. So, and that's what I wanted to go do. I wanted to go work at Warner Brothers, but I want to do voices, right? So,
You wanted to be Mel Blanc.
yeah, 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 man. I love that dude when I was growing up. I don't know. Making my own voices or whatever, has always been a challenge, but I think I could have done it. Yeah, but Mel Blanc, that was one of my idols kind of coming up. And then one time I got to work with Charles Fleischer, who was the voice of Roger Rabbit.
Oh,
I got to
nice.
work with him one time in DC. That was a really cool experience, but I ended up losing touch with him. So with the animation part of it, I think it's really cool because the animation, I know that from my own research that Family Guy does, and I love the show. I mean, it's literally one of my all-time favorite shows, especially in animation, because it is the content in it and some of the social commentary, but also just the plain basic level of comedy that it does sometimes
Mhm.
is really cool. And so I know that the animation that they do there is sort of old school animation and sort of made into more of a modern day sort of
Mhm.
animation that kind of take the two, kind of combine them. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah. I mean, what one thing that the producers are very proud of is Family Guy is one of the few animations that's still hand drawn.
Yeah.
Like it when it gets shipped over, it's like what you watch on TV, even though it looks much cleaner than it did, 15, 20 years ago, it is still hand drawn. It
Wow.
is still like pencil and paper that they do over in Korea.
That's
Like
old
the
school.
storyboarding we all do digitally, but I mean, before I got there, they did do it on like stickies and notepads and stuff, and but yeah, it's that it is still traditional animation that's done over there, and it is sometimes cool. It's like the directors, what they can request is they can have, the Korea is going to work on the whole animation, but they might have a handful of scenes that they're like, I don't know how that's going to look. Like just
Hmm.
based off the storyboard, I'm not sure how the movement's going to be. So they could request a pencil test. So
Right.
they'll do a pencil test animation of certain scenes so they can get it, review it, and kind of like try to spice it up, fix it, however, before it gets finalized and colored and all that stuff. But it's like when you see things without all the color and all of that, you kind of realize you go, oh wow, yeah, that's that's a drawing. They drew that.
Yeah. I think a lot of listeners and people would know a pencil test. So if you watch like DVD extras, a lot of times they'll have like the extra and they'll have a scene and it won't be the actual animated movie, but it'll be like a scene from the movie, and you'll see it, and it's drawn like a pen. That's like a pencil test, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Oh wow.
And yeah, Family Guy's still going strong at that. Like they haven't changed their pipeline. They've just refined and improved it. It's a Family Guy is a well-oiled machine. Like for such an irreverent show, it is such
Right.
a uh, good work culture. Like the everybody there is nice. Like if anything, the biggest one of the biggest blessings I've had beyond what I said before in terms of my own creative endeavors is that they are a corporate job, but they are also very respectful. Nobody there is forced to like do crazy hours or unrealistic expectations. If you feel like you can't get something done, they'll get someone to help you. Like it is, it's definitely a dream job just in terms of it's a job, right? We all have jobs that we got to work, but at least it's one where it's like they look out for their employees. It's not like some of these horror stories that you hear at certain studios where they're offering the employees cocaine just to keep them up all night to get the work done.
I
Like
know a
it's
lot of
nothing
people
like
who would
that.
have want to worked at that studio.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm just saying other people I know. But like,
Yes,
yeah,
but
what studio is that? Let me
cocaine to
know.
get more work done, that sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, you're going to do a lot of great work on that too, right?
High quality work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Wow.
it's very much been a blessing in terms of the job.
All right. So I have to ask because anybody listening to this would have to ask. They I'm sure they ask you all the time who from the show that we actually hear, we don't see, but actually hear, including people like Seth MacFarlane and people like that. Who have you met? Who have you rubbed elbows with at
That
all? 'Cause you got to
that's
tell this.
cool.
This is
That's
a
a
great.
much better question. Like usually the question is, have you met Seth? Have you met Seth
No, no. I want to
MacFarlane?
know. Every Mila Kunis is on there. I mean, you got
Yeah.
you got all kinds of really cool people on there.
Um, I have so I've had a conversation with Alex Borstein.
Okay. Oh yeah. I didn't even say her. Yeah. Who from
Yeah,
of Mad
she
TV fame? She was.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, he
Miss
looking like a
Swan.
man, Miss Swan.
Yes.
Absolutely. I went straight to it too. Absolutely. Yeah.
She's brilliant. She's
Yeah.
great. And they like to tease her now because she's won awards on The Amazing Miss Maisel
Mm-hmm. She's great on
and
that too.
and but no, it was just like we had Family Guy's 500th episode. There was like a party and it just so happened the table we sat at was right next to Alex and her parents that were there. I feel well, okay, kind of a funny side story about it. So it's like I haven't had like a conversation with Seth. I have talked to like Mike Henry, who's the voice of Cleveland, who
Yeah.
used to be the voice of Cleveland
Who was from Virginia, right?
from Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
from
went to
Richmond. Yeah.
collegiate high school and all
Yeah.
that. I actually met him when I was in high school because I gave him the spec script of Family Guy. When I was
Oh,
like,
no
oh, I
shit.
want to write for your show. And so I got to talk to him about that. I'm like, do you even
Do you
remember
remember meeting
that?
me?
And he's, nah, I don't know. And it's like, it's cool, it's cool. And he's like, but hey, here you are. But
Which
what's
is cool.
funny is, so he stepped down from doing Cleveland, and then there's this guy that I know, Arif, that he was doing his own Cleveland impression while playing like Call of Duty and stuff. He had this big YouTube channel, like millions of subscribers on there. And one of the directors that I've worked with on there, like he's like, "Hey, do you know this guy Arif?" Oh yeah, me and him we talked before. We tried to work together on indie animations, and he's a great Cleveland. And I was like, yeah, no, he's awesome. He's a super nice guy, and we should bring him in, right? I was like, dude, if you would never regret it, right? And so the producers were thinking about bringing Arif in to be the new Cleveland, and and so I texted Arif, yo man, they're gonna reach out, they're gonna reach out, like practice your A, B, and C take, like
Mm-hmm.
try to be ready for it, right? And and so obviously under his own talent and hard work, he got the gig. But it was really cool that we both knew each other before either of us worked at Family Guy. But then now like he's now doing the voice of Cleveland and I'm drawing out what Cleveland's actions are going to be anytime.
That's pretty cool. Well, the whole
But
thing with Mike Henry was with him stepping down as being the voice of Cleveland was he was a white guy doing the voice of a black guy, right? And then so
yes,
he decided he wasn't going to do it anymore, and then O'Reef came in and took it over. I can cut that
was
part out. I
great
don't
for a
know.
reef.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a great thing because Mike Henry is fine. It didn't displace him any. He does half the
No,
voices on the show anyway.
yeah, he was very
He's
fine
still
with it.
getting residuals for any past time he's doing Cleveland.
Right.
And it's great for Arif because here's someone that can do the role, and now he's able to make a living off of his own talent. I think it's a great thing. I just if we're speaking politically, voiceover is not the realm for appropriation or racial gatekeeping because part of the the fun of it is that you can be anybody, you could do anything. It's your
Sure.
voice can you can shape it to whatever character. It's like, okay, if we have alien characters, do we need to go out to outer space and cast aliens? No, we whoever can do the voice, or it
Right.
could even work in reverse, right? You've got Phil Lamar, great voiceover actor. He's been the judge in Family Guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
also great on Mad TV. He's also Samurai Jack, who's an Asian character.
Right.
So is it bad that he did it? No, of course it's not bad that he did it.
No,
He was
not at all.
great. He's iconic. He did an amazing job. So I feel like we just kind of got to be careful in that realm. Animation is imagination, right?
Right. Well, that's one of the great things about animation that I've always thought was really cool is that you don't the only budget you need is the budget to be able to make it happen on a screen. I don't even really watch the show, but it was like a behind the cameras view of some big scene on Game of Thrones, right? And it was a bunch of army and it was a bunch of explosions and a bunch of other stuff going off and everything else like that. And it's just like this huge movie set, like this whole and hundreds of people were running across, and you don't have to do animation. You can just make it whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things I always really loved about it. Really cool. So, what is the typical day for you? Do you work from home? I always wonder. Are you
Mm-hmm.
actually go to an office, or do you when you
Yeah,
actually?
there's Family Guy's one, or just a lot of Family Guy specifically is not really planning on bringing everybody back to the office.
That'll change with COVID, right? Everybody, you
Yeah, everybody
right?
left, but that, again, like we have 9 directors on the show, and they're all pretty seasoned. They've been doing it forever. Like over half of them have been on the show from like the start, right? And they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to the office, and it's like
Sure. Who
Family
would?
Guy can't function without them. So they're pretty much calling the shots, and then Family Guy is getting a new office, but it's a smaller office with the intention of everybody not coming back. They're like, all right, we're gonna downsize so that some people can come in, but other people don't have to. And my position is definitely one that doesn't have to come in. We kind of work in a bubble. So
That's pretty cool.
a typical work cycle for me would be is I get assigned to an episode and with a director, and then the director will give me about a third of the episode, like in terms of different scenes throughout, like however they want to disperse it. But the script is about 40 pages, so they'll give me about 12 pages,
Okay.
or maybe more depending on how it reads. But I get assigned that, and then I get a chance to kind of look through it, figure out what complications I may or may not have, any questions I may have for clarity about something, and then we jump on a call with the writers, and it's called our storyboard launch. And so that's the opportunity for the director and any of us artists to kind of ask any questions like, hey, when you said this, were you imagining Stewie wearing his normal outfit, or should he be wearing like a
Mm,
a
okay.
sailor's hat or something? Like, what
Right.
were you thinking when you wrote that? So any kind of clarity that we want, or anything like that. And then we go through essentially a 3-step process where we do what's called the thumbnail storyboards. And that's where we keep things really loose, really rough. We're just kind of getting those early ideas out there. Like, okay, so we're thinking the camera's here, and maybe Stewie's on the couch, and Brian comes walking in stage left, right? And they're like, no, 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 let's do it from over here, and let's have Stewie on the floor, not on the couch, right? It's just like we want to keep it loose because we want to be able to change the ideas easily.
Yeah.
So
Oh
if
yeah.
one
Yeah.
idea isn't working, like you don't want to put all this work in and they go, nope, we're cutting all of that.
Sure.
So we do the thumbnails, keep it real loose, and then once we all then we pitch that to the supervising director. We're like, okay, so we're thinking of doing this, right? We're going to do this, 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 and then they give their input, and then we go and do what's called comps or A panels, and that's where we take the frame with the most information of any certain shot, whether it's the establishing shot or you know Brian and Stewie's room, and we go and put everything on model. We go, okay, this is what the shot's gonna look like. And so then the director can say, the crib's too small, or Brian's too big compared to Stewie, like just it's very much the math of it. Like, okay, this is not working perspective wise, or let's swap these things around. And so once we've put every shot to that test, then we act them all out. Then we get to have fun. We bring in the audio track, hear the acting of the characters, and kind of imagine what their gestures are. And overall, Family Guy, we have a lot of typical go-to poses, but every
I
once in a
bet.
while
Yeah.
you can squeeze in some fun acting, or like, oh, what if you like did some weird curtsy thing on that line?
Nice.
And I every board artist is different, but I always do try to throw in something odd to
Right.
see if it sticks. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's like you won't know unless you try. So
Right.
then you throw that in there, and then it gets thrown to each person above you, and they give their notes, and then either a revisionist will clean up, or it might go right back to me and I cleaned up. It's usually easier when the person who's had the entire time sees it through. But yeah, and that process can take 2 to 3 months
Mm.
per episode. So there's a lot of activity early on when we start, right? A lot of talking to different people, a lot of figuring things out. But then, like right now where I'm at, and one of the reasons why I had some availability is I'm actually between episodes. Like I finished one episode, and they're figuring some things out before putting me on another one. So I'm just kind of helping out on another episode. So like the director's like, here, do this. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, okay.
Yeah, because you were saying yesterday you had this was a light week for you, but then like next week that could all change, and then you know when it's coming, right? But right now, but you have your lulls, and then you have your peak times, right?
Yeah. Well, we also go through what's called hiatus. So it's almost near the so whichever episode I work on next, it's either going to be the second to last or the last episode of the season. So after that, there's going to be kind of like a hangover period where there's just not
No,
much work for
nothing.
board artists. So
Right.
they ask us to take some unpaid time off.
Right.
But it versus the wilds of other shows, like it works out all the same. So
Works
I'm
out
like,
fine.
yeah, great.
Well,
Like
you
it's
work on other things, and then you do stuff, right?
yeah.
Speaking of Family Guy, right? Every show has that. It's just a
Mhm.
production type of a situation, and that's just what it the way it works out. That's so cool, man. It's so cool that you have this job that is just. I'm not jealous. I don't know what the word is for it. Envious. I don't know, but you earned it, so that's really cool. That's really really cool.
But I
Uh,
appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective on it because you could easily take it in either direction.
Sure. And I
Like
don't like people who do that. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that I've never been guilty of doing that. I don't. When I was younger, if I'd known you, like, all right, like I'm 50 now, right? But if I'd known you and what was going on, and I was 30, yeah, I'd be like, well, how the hell did you get on there, man? I could do that. What the hell, man? But I know, and I know you've earned it too. That's also part of the equation. Don't get me wrong. But I look at people who are in situations like you now with so much more of a hell yeah, and I don't even care who the person is. I don't even know. You could be one of those people who walk around and go, "Do you know who I am?" But I would still go, good for that dude. Because I know you got there
Well,
of
this
your
may
own
sound
merits.
silly, but I, when I worked parking cars, one of the fun things about it is we had so much time to just stand around and talk because we just wait for residents to come home, right?
Sure, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but like a lot of my coworkers were like actors or musicians or whatnot. Like we're all on that Hollywood pursuit.
Right.
But I would say that the mentality is in your head, you have the ego of the all-time greats. In your head, you tell yourself, I'm as good as Charlie Chaplin or I'm as good as Tarantino, whatever. But you don't act on that ego until after you've done all the things to prove it.
Right.
To me, what carries me, what pushes me is telling me it's like I can be as great as them, but it takes years and years and years of hard work and refining and practicing and improving. And so I don't get to believe or act on that belief until after I've done it all. And so right now, I'm very happy with what I'm doing, but I have nothing on my resume to justify any level of ego.
Right. Well, I think it's really cool. I mean, you're definitely have it's definitely an achievement though that nobody can take away. You definitely have made it to one of the most known shows in all of the world, much less I think in human history. You can't go anywhere. I remember one time a while back I was talking to a friend of mine. He was in Asia. I believe he said Thailand. And he said that he was walking down the street and there was a cart that had all these bootleg DVDs of Family Guy. And apparently the guy had just got a bunch in, and people were literally like lined up to buy these bootleg. I don't know if they were bootleg. They probably were, but they were buying Family Guy DVDs. He said they looked bootleg, but yeah, it's just that popular, and people were just like, yeah, yeah, and they were just money hand over fist for those things. And
Well, Family Guy did such a good job of knowing like their top priority was always be funny. You
right,
know, other shows, other stories have different priorities. They're like, we're gonna be funny, but also have meaning or whatever it is. Family Guy's like, we will cut in the middle of a story just to tell you a funny joke. You know,
right.
like we don't
Well, all the
care.
cutaways. I mean, they are synonymous for the cutaways. This is like the time I ended up in such and then it cuts away, and it's Peter getting hit with the bowling ball or something, right? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And it's like boom, and it goes back. Now those are awesome. So, what are your? Well, I mean, you have a family now too, so this is I
Mhm.
was talking about that. So, where did you? I know you're married. You have a son. Is it Dorbs, man? That kid's
Yes,
adorable.
he is. I
He's
appreciate that.
awesome. Yeah, it reminds me because my kid's 11 now, but he's very big for his age. He's 11, but he's like 5'10", 5, like
Oh
he's
wow.
tall. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's almost as tall as me. I'm like 6 foot, and but he doesn't look like a little kid much anymore. But I go back and I look at the old pictures of him, and it reminds me of when I've seen pictures of you and your family. I'm like, man, what a cool looking kid. So, how did you meet your wife? If you don't mind me
Salsa
asking,
dancing.
you met her. Oh, okay, salsa dancing.
That yeah, like what I was born shameless. My mother raised me to be shameless.
Nothing
So
wrong with that.
what that's one of the things that made it easy to do stand up, right? Like, oh, I'll talk about whatever on stage,
Yeah.
whatever. But I would always clam up and get embarrassed when it came to dancing. So I was like, I'm going to change that. And it was funny because I had my best friend at the time. We were like trying to get out and do more social things, and he's like, I'm thinking of taking hip hop classes, and I was like, I agree with you, but salsa. And he's like, salsa. I'm like, yeah, it's partner work. Like you have to dance with somebody
Yeah,
like
but
to
like, yeah,
do
not
it.
you though, dude, right? Like that's what I would say. Like, I'm not dancing with you, right? So you got partner
But
with her, Leslie,
so
right?
yeah,
Isn't it? If you don't mind me saying,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, Leslie, and it was just like it was great because it kind of played out as I could only hope. Like took the classes, got good enough that I don't embarrass myself on the dance floor, and then they that same teacher hosted like a salsa night at a club. So I would always try to go to those because there'd be people that I knew from class or
okay,
whatnot.
gotcha.
But then I danced with her and we had a great time. And then like I was looking for another partner, or whatever, because you dance with a bunch of people. It's like,
Sure.
just whatever between songs. And then I saw her again and she just like shuffled over with this big smile on her face. And I was just, I need that enthusiasm in my life.
Yeah,
And it turned out that's just who she is, right? And in terms of like dating and stuff, I cannot give advice because I feel like it was very much luck, right? Like you just go
yeah,
out and but In terms of compatibility between partners, you could look for any number of things, but me and her are on the same wavelength. We have the same type of enthusiasm and energy, and that just makes a world of difference. Like I've gone on dates with girls where it's just, they might be a little bit like, oh, opposites attract, right? Like I'm boisterous and outgoing, and she's quiet and reserved. It's like, nah, man,
No, not gonna
nah, it
happen.
doesn't work. We both got to like we joke that it's like donkey and donkey on another whirlwind adventure. We're just
Right.
two donkeys going on
That's
crazy
awesome.
adventures together. No
No,
Shrek in this picture.
man, that's awesome, dude. And that they're a great looking family. I'm happy for you in that. But what are your plans for the future? Obviously, you got the solid with the family guy. But what are you looking to do down the road that you would possibly expand on what the creativeness of what Patrick McCarthy of who
Yeah.
Patrick McCarthy is?
I mean, like the original intention was to, tell my own stories, right? So, but so much of my time in LA has been figuring out what does that mean? What does that look like? And
Right.
not only like how does that look from a professional and technical standpoint, but also what's the story I'm telling?
Hmm.
Which sounds silly, but one thing that's beautiful about stand up is you're answering that question without realizing it. So when you do stand up, you get up there and you do 30 minutes of material, and then if you want, you could take a moment and go, what did I choose to say with that time? I had a couple hundred people in front of me, and I decided I wanted to talk about politics or I wanted to talk about my family. It's like, okay, so did these things matter to you? It's like, well, no. Then why did you get up on stage and talk about it?
Good
Like,
point.
what matters to you?
Right.
And the same thing exists in like if I'm going to put years of my life trying to get a story told and made and get networks to be behind it, is this a story that I need to tell that is important to me, and why is it important to me? Like, because otherwise motivation will wane at some point.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so I kind of just like made sure that whatever I make is it doesn't when I say meaningful, it's just essentially uh out here they say uh make what you love. Right. So when you hear that saying, you're like, okay, well, I love sci-fi horror. Okay. So
Right.
then make a sci-fi horror. That's what you need to make because that's what you love.
Yeah.
And that's good enough. But I also have like heard, it's be who you needed when you were younger. When were you vulnerable? When were you turning to entertainment? When were you in need of it, right? And so for me personally, that was when I was 11 or 12. My parents going through a divorce, much turbulence in the household, and that's when I'm watching Dragon Ball Z, playing Pokemon, watching Family Guy. Like these are the things keeping me oblivious to
Yeah.
what's going on in a good way, right?
That's how I got into stand up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parents are going through a divorce when I was a kid. And one of the things that I remember one time I mean, we didn't know about him then. I would tell the story like Bill Cosby. My mom, I think they were separated, but my mom and my dad were fighting about something. My mom took me in my room and put on a Bill Cosby record,
Oh well.
and I listened to it. And I just, you know, back then he was, he was everybody's second dad. But yeah, no, that's funny because I have thought lately in my own because I did stand up for a bit there, and then I got out of it, and I've gotten back into it. I've been doing some here and there when I can, and one of the things that I'll literally think of a joke and I'll go, no, and I won't do it. And even I'll tell my wife and she'll laugh at it because and I'll try my jokes on her and she doesn't laugh a lot of the times. Right. But there was one recently that I said to her and I go, yeah. And she goes, oh, that's really funny. I go, nah, that's not going to work because I try to think of what I would have laughed at when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what would I
Exactly.
have laughed at? Yeah. So that's my point of that was like the correlation between the two.
Yeah, be your favorite comedian.
Yeah. I need to start writing for myself, not to, because I fully admit there was a lot of times I'd be on the road. I'm writing jokes for drunk people on a Friday or Saturday night at 11 o'clock when all these people should be home with their children instead of paying somebody else to watch them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
What do those people want to hear? No, I need to. Yeah, that's awesome,
No,
man.
totally. And I kind of had that epiphany uh when what was it? 2017. So in 2017, I broke up with my then girlfriend, and we had been sharing a place together. So I knew that the only way I was going to be out here in LA by myself was I would need to spend some time back in my car to save up some money.
Mm,
So I went back into my car. I was in my car for like 4 months that time around.
really? Oh wow.
Yeah. And but I was working at that valet place, and it was a 24-hour building. So sometimes I
You
would
could
just
just.
sneak into an empty office and sleep on the floor there. But it was just what I could do to make sure I had enough money saved up so I could put a safe security deposit, find a place with something of affordable rent. Like, don't want to talk finances too much, but essentially in
That's
my time
expensive out
out
there, man.
here, I was essentially using a credit card and was using that to essentially fund my dream. So it's
Right.
like every year I was just building a little bit more debt.
Hmm.
I was just like I was
You ain't
paying
the
my
only one,
bills,
man.
but I was just a little bit of debt. And so that's it's like, okay, well, if I need to have actual cash on hand because you can't just use a credit card for
Sure.
rent. So it's in my car, but then during that time when I was transitioning back to a place, I was just, I just felt like the world was kind of not over, not so dramatic, but it was just like, okay, restart of my life,
Yeah. Breakups are
new,
breakups. Yeah.
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 But I was watching the anime Naruto,
Okay.
and
Familiar with it, but yeah.
but it was just like it was for a different generation. Like it wasn't my generation. My generation was watching Dragon Ball Z, right? We were
Right.
loving that. And but I was watching that and I went, man, like 11, 12-year-old me would go nuts for this. And then I was like, damn, there's a version of me that would go nuts for something.
Right.
Like, because current me doesn't go nuts for anything. Current me is like, oh yeah, I might go see that. I might go do that too.
Right.
But there's a version of me, and who knows me better than me that can
Right.
obsess over something.
Right.
So just as you did, right? It's like, okay, let me write a story that I believe 11, 12-year-old me would love to obsess over.
Right.
I feel like I've been doing that. And so where I find myself currently is I finished a trailer for my own show,
Cool.
and I've been kind of shopping it around. And shopping's a weird term. Like there's the Hollywood jargon where everyone's like, oh yeah, like
Right.
doing this, doing that, pitching it around. I gave myself this whole year to understand what the hell does that mean? What does that mean to like pitch and shop it around? Because it's a crazy game, and these executives that are in charge of that stuff, they have their game that they know how to play, and you're trying to play by it. And but at the same time, I don't know what I'm doing. So
Right.
I'm trying to figure it out as I go. So I made a trailer, I put it into some film festivals just to see who I meet at these things, and learn about, you know, could I make it on my own? Could I self-invest and produce, and then later get it on a platform, because there's shows that have done that.
Hmm.
There's all kinds of new ways of getting it done out there. But so I'm just trying to be diligent. But so yeah, I made my own fantasy comedy series, and yeah, right now talking to some people, other things, but at the same time trying to uh, be calm about it.
Right.
I don't,
You believe in yourself always, right? But you want to kind of stay grounded, I guess is the term maybe I'm looking for.
well, it's like a lot of writers that I've met, they'll write half a dozen different pilots for different show ideas, whatever, because they're just trying to throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. It's kind of
Right.
like in comedy, right? Oh, I'll go do an open mic, or like Chris Rock will do like 3 hours of material, toss out two of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I'm not trying to do that, right? I put my time and energy into this because this is the story I'm going to tell. This
Gotcha.
isn't, I'm not seeing if it's going to stick. I've worked it, reworked it, but execs aren't used to that. So I throw something over to them and they might just go, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, but no thank you. Because if it doesn't hit them right away because they feel like that's how much work you put into it. They're like, well, you just put that initial work into it. So I'm just going to give it a quick glance. But who knows? I might be talking out my ass for all I know. So I'm just going to put it out there, follow up with them, try to get feedback from executives and see if I can't get one of them to go, hey, actually, this works.
That's awesome.
We'll see.
Well, I wish you luck on that, man.
Thank you.
It's so cool. You know, one of the things I know about LA is it's hard to deal with rejection. Like, it's kind of, and you deal with a lot of it in all the entertainment business. I don't know. It's kind of one of the reasons I was like, I don't know, what if Patrick says no to coming on the podcast? But then you were so cool about it. Well, if you need anybody, let me know. You got my number. But that's awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on here and wish you the best of luck and all that. And you're welcome back anytime. And keep me posted, man. I want to see what you do. And of course, every time I watch Family Guy, I'll be looking at the end. There's Patrick. There's his name. There's his name. But no, it really,
you got to pause it because it's trying to go to the next show.
Right. Well, it really is cool. And I don't know, for instance, like what you actually work on, but it is cool since I've known you've been working on the show that sometimes I do watch an episode and I go, I wonder which ones you might be doing. Like, I wonder which frames you might have been working on, which is really cool.
Well, I think I just check of the latest season of Family Guy for any of your listeners that want to check it out.
Absolutely.
I think that two of the more recent ones, Lifeguard Meg and
okay.
Supermarket Pete of this current season, I worked on those ones. And so if you watch Lifeguard Meg, if Stewie and Brian are in a cafe, I probably did that. Okay. Not all of them because the director he split them up to different ones, but
yeah,
I definitely did a lot of stuff with Stewie and Brian running a cafe, and in the supermarket Pete one, if you see Joe and Brian together, it was probably me, because definitely anytime they're at the Drunken Clan in Supermarket Pete, I boarded all of that. So
that's so cool, man.
Yeah.
That's really neat. That's really, really neat, man. I'm happy for you, dude. I really
Thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time to do all of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, I was like, I don't know if you want to do it, but I mean, I had an in, so I thought, why not?
Well, I appreciate you letting me talk out some things.
We're going to talk to you again at some point to get an update and everything else like that. Thank you, Patrick McCarthy, for being here on the podcast. Everybody, thanks for listening. Patrick, I'll see you soon, buddy. And how was that, everybody? Did you enjoy my conversation with Patrick McCarthy? Thank you so much again to him for coming on the podcast here. Absolutely fantastic of him. He had told me that his schedule was light for last week, so I said, hey, let's get you on now before you get busy, because that's what he was saying he's about to do, making more awesome episodes of Family Guy. Cannot wait to have him back on the podcast here at some point. We'll do a little more hanging out, a little less interview, right? That's what I'm saying. So let's get to our charities. No Kid Hungry. Many school-aged children are in situations where the best meal of the day for them comes from school. No Kid Hungry helps children in need with meals when they are away from school, such as weekends and holidays. No Kid Hungry. Wounded Warrior Project. The brave men and women who have served our country deserve the best care we can give them after they return home. Some of them have wounds that are external and or internal that they might need help with, or even just accessible housing, okay? Wounded Warrior Project. BestFriends.org is making a difference by helping homeless dogs and cats in shelters be adopted faster and in more numbers. Their goal is to have the entire country no-kill shelters by the year 2025. Check out these charities if you can, and any others that may be in your local areas. And after all that charity, if you got time for a little chair me, you can support the show through our official listener support app, Venmo, at JonDpodcom. Don't forget Twitter, Jon D Podcast, Jon D Comedy. That's right. Suck it, Elon. Write to the podcast, JonDpodcom at gmail.com. Facebook, Jon D Podcast. Instagram and Threads, Jon D Podcom. Executive producers for Jon D Podcast are Tom Hancock and Liz Miller. Thanks to them each for helping them make this happen in their own ways. This episode was recorded and produced by yours truly, Jon G. Miller, in the Amber Tree Media Studio. Don't forget blendjet.com. JonDpod12 as your code for 12% off and free shipping. Honestly and sincerely, thank you again to Patrick McCarthy for being on the podcast. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, Patrick McCarthy Animations. McCarthy has 2 C's. If you can't figure that out, just whatever. You shouldn't be using YouTube. No, that was awesome. Very fun time. Thank you for listening to episode number 68, numero 68, in the old Espanol language of Jon D Podcast. I've been your host, Jon D Miller. All right? I know, times are getting a little crazy. Let's chill out a little bit. All right? Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And until next time, later for you.